It's a positive film. It has heroes and villains, and that it essentially is a fun movie to watch. It's been a long time since people have been able to go to the movies and see a sort of straightforward, wholesome, fun adventure.
Well, it's a fantasy. It's not science fiction so much as it is space fantasy. And it's about people. It's finally about people and not finally about science.
The story, when you actually put it into words, is only so much nonsense to hang a great visual experience onto. It's the stuff that fairy tales are made of.
It's sort of boiling down religion into a very basic concept. The fact that there is some deity or some power or some force that sort of controls our destiny works for good and also works for evil.
Marvelous, healthy innocence. Great pace, wonderful to look at, full of guts, nothing unpleasant. I mean, people go bang bang and people fall over and are dead, but, no horrors. A sort of wonderful freshness about it, kind of like a wonderful fresh air.
It's got whatever you want it to be. It's pure entertainment. It's like a roller coaster ride, and it can be interpreted as long as you enjoy it, which is the intention.
Hello and welcome back to Generation Skywalker. I'm Dan, and hot off the heels of releasing a guide to Palitoy Part 4, we've got some more Palitoy talk, but this time it isn't with Dave and John and Pete. This time I've got a very special guest to talk about a new project he's working on, Total Star Wars, the Palitoy Saga. It's Brian Hickey. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, Dan. Great to be back on the show.
I mean, you were on at Christmas at Farthest From, so I'm going to mention about that. So obviously when we were on stage there, we managed to record that, and we've recently dropped that. But how was the rest of the weekend? I didn't make the Sunday, and I know you were doing a panel there.
It was, well, because we had the storm, that weekend, the Sunday was a bit quiet, but it was still a great vibe, some great people in the room, and got to do my own panel that Sunday, revealing that, at the time, the forthcoming Kickstarter for Total Star Wars toys, the Palitoy Saga. And that got a great reaction, from everybody in the room. So that was very exciting. And of course, we're now on the other end of that, where the Kickstarter is now live and then the campaign is running currently.
Obviously there was difficulties because of the storm, but what did you make of the show?
It was great. It was my first Farthest From visit, but I have been to some other shows that Dave has done for Action Force, the roll call shows. So I found there was a very similar kind of vibe, with them. Like they're small, intimate shows, but there's the general kind of, camaraderie, the friendship.
The community spirit.
Community spirit. That's what it is. The community spirit is absolutely amazing. And, you can get top dogs from Hasbro rubbing shoulders with just, average kind of Star Wars fans. Like it's that Dave brings in a great host of guests, all different kind of backgrounds. And it's just a really, really good buzz. Great spirit at those shows. So this show, like Farthest From last December, it was no different from that. It was just a really good vibe, really chilled out. And if you were there to buy some stuff, there was loads of great stuff in the room to buy. If you're looking for carded, you're looking for loose, if you're looking for books, comics, all that great vintage stuff. And Dave just PayPal'd me there a few quid for saying that. So,
well, I'll tell you what, that's a few quid as well. We were big fans of Farthest From at Generation Skywalker. We've done the Saturday night for the last couple of years there with the Christmas meal, but I've lost count of how many of those I've been to. I mean, at the start, I started going back in 2014, so over 10 years ago, and he was doing 3 shows a year then. I'm somewhat nostalgic for Farthest From in a funny kind of way. The summer shows are superb, driving down through the New Forest and, getting to the pub and meeting up with all your mates and having a beer.
There's one now. I have never done a show in New Forest or in Fordingbridge summertime. I've only ever been out there in the winter. So I think it must be great to be there in the summer.
That's beautiful. It was a lovely part of the world. I mean, obviously you've been on the show a few times now, so I don't think there's any need to do a formal introduction, but tell us a bit about on the new book and how that's going.
Well, I mean, just in terms of a bit of background on the new book.
Yes.
When I was working with Bob Breakin on my Palitoy story, as well as doing the design on the book, I was working with Bob, kind of going through image archives and selecting images to go into the book. And we uncovered, I mean, more images than we could use at the time, and some great insights into not just Star Wars, but like lots of other kind of brands of Palitoy. And then after the book was Bob's book, My Palitoy Story, after that was printed and, you know, all the backer rewards had been kind of fulfilled, Bob sent me a box of slides in the post saying, my friend Brian Turner gave me these, and if you want to use any of them in a future project, you're more than welcome. So I opened, there's like hundreds of slides. You know, they were 35mm transparencies, like in the projector, like in school, back in the day, hundreds of them. So I kind of started going through those, and I could see some amazing images that I'd never seen before. Some wonderful Toy Fair images like from 1978, 79, 80, 81, all with lots of great Star Wars content in there. And the seed of an idea to do an expanded kind of Star Wars book focusing on Palitoy just kind of began with that. And then Bob sent me another batch of slides that he had found in his own slides. He sent those over. And I've been working through getting all of those kind of professionally scanned, you know, really high res, cleaning them up. It's kind of like a part of a separate project called the Palitoy Image Archive. That's kind of an ongoing project that we're hoping to have complete by the end of the year. Wow. But as part of kind of, we were working on that with Bob and with his late friend, Brian Turner, we were able to uncover a lot of Star Wars related imagery that is going to, and that's going into this brand new book called Total Star Wars Toys, the Palitoy Saga. And what this book is going to do, it's essentially, it's an extension of Bob's My Palitoy story, but it's focused in completely on the Star Wars brand. So it's going to tell the story of, you know, how Palitoy became involved with Star Wars and how it ultimately ended up with Palitoy, you know, being closed down at the end of the day.
Yeah.
In that journey, we're going to show hundreds of photographs of behind the scenes, Toy Fair, things like that. And then we're also going to have lots of photos of the toys as we document when they were released. And we're partnering up with collectors in the UK and in Ireland to photograph rare items that would have been produced or commissioned by Palitoy, which still exist today and are in people's collections. So, for example, diorama displays for retail. We've come across two of those in one collection, and we even have material of, you know, photographed from the 1980s of when those pieces were first constructed in the studio. So we can kind of tell that sort of story there. We've also looking at more the pre-production side of things. We uncovered the tooling drawings, which are beautiful hand-drawn, I suppose, diagrams for the manufacturing of the tooling for the twin pod cloud car.
I saw the photos of that online on the weekend. It looks, very interesting.
That's amazing to see that. And it's not just one page. It's like 20 drawings, all for different components for his different toolings that had to be produced for that. So, you know, it's little things like that just sort of enhance the overall visual quality of what's going into the book. And of course, then we've been in contact with Jason Smith, who's, you know, collectors will know Jason has kind of done a really good sort of archive of the Palitoy cardback variants. And Jason's allowing us to use his research to put that into the book too, so we can make it, you know, as complete as we can make it for people who are interested in collecting Palitoy. So it's kind of covering a lot of different bases. But what I hope we really get across in the book is that very special Palitoy story, that sense of kind of camaraderie and community within Palitoy, and how everybody in there really, they were doing their best to look out for each other. And even after they finished up at Palitoy, you still see how they're trying to give their former colleagues, you know, send business their way and look after them. It really is, I find it a very touching story. So I hope that comes across too in the book.
That's amazing. You know, when you mentioned there about the Palitoy guide, the cardback guide, we just finished a show looking at, you know, we covered all of the toys, you know, by this time last year. We'd released all of those shows, and we've come back to it now, and we're looking at, you know, how the, you know, collecting's evolved over the last 40 years since 1985 and Palitoy closed down. And Dave Tree and John Aves and Pete talk a lot about, you know, what it was like collecting, you know, certainly in the early 90s going into 2000s, and, you know, the resources that were available, which was effectively, you know, Steve Sansweet's book, you know, from concept to screen to collectible. And then they, you know, get into the, how do collectors start to document this information. And, you know, the Palitoy cardback guide, I think I mentioned initially that was done. I think the guy's name was John Ford, who originally set that up, and Jason then took it over, and now they're using that to influence something that's being, you know, generated in 2025. There's a, you know, massive through line there from what was going on back then all the way to today. It's brilliant.
That's a really good point there, because it is down to the work of collectors that we have a lot of the information that we have today. And there's people, you know, like Dave, like Jason, and other people out there in the community, you know, and there's too many to list really.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's there, all that information is coming together. So I suppose we're very lucky. There's a lot of research that we don't have to do because it's been done by collectors. And it means then that we can focus on kind of digging as deep as we can into that kind of that Palitoy history and just putting some context on the photos. That's one of the biggest attractions for me in the book, is those historic photos that, because they're from personal collections, they've never been seen before in public. So that's what I'm looking forward to most, to sharing with people.
In terms of the narrative of the book, does it tell a story, or is it concentrating on some more of the minutiae of collecting?
Well, I suppose that it covers a few bases. There is definitely a narrative that's going to cover, if you like, that history. And that is going to be heavily informed by interviews that we've done with the surviving members of the Palitoy design team and marketing teams. Yeah. So we've interviewed, you know, Bob Breakin, obviously, Jeff Macy. He was the brand manager for Star Wars for Britain and all of Europe. Greg Hughes was a designer who worked on Star Wars right at the very beginning, straight out of the bat. He did up the design drawings for the Palitoy version of the X-Wing. And then you've got, on the sort of pre-production side, you've got Roger Morrison. He would have been the tooling manager, and him and Bob Breakin travelled to Kenner in November 1977 to basically see what Kenner were doing and what Palitoy needed to do to be able to produce Star Wars toys. Then you have, on the PR side, you've got Carol Dayton. She would have worked with a guy called Nick Farmer, who was a display designer and prop designer, former Palitoy staff himself. And he produced the Darth Vader replica costumes that would be kind of rolled out at different kind of toy shops to promote Palitoy's products. He also made a lot of the retail displays for Palitoy as well, and dioramas that used the toy fair. And then we even interviewed Jim Swearingen, because Jim is, you know, and Kenner is a really big part of the story, because that's where, you know, if it wasn't for Kenner, Palitoy would never have got the gig to do the toys. So we felt it was important to reach out to Jim and get, you know, a bit of the Kenner side of the story too.
You've also got, you know, Dennis Fisher in the background there. It was also another big concern in the UK at the time. And I imagine there was some rivalry there about who was going to get the Star Wars gig thing, or maybe neither of them wanted it.
We could give a bit of a reveal here, right? Or maybe it's not a reveal. Maybe it's already out there in the public knowledge, but Palitoy didn't want Star Wars. They actually suggested that Dennis Fisher should take it. Okay. Palitoy had Action Man. Yeah. Action Man was like, you know, toy of the decade. So, but they were, you know, under pressure from Bernie Loomis. They had to take the Star Wars and take it on, which ended up being great for all of us. But Dennis Fisher wasn't out of the picture, because when Dennis Fisher was having a bit of a slump, Palitoy moved Star Wars over to the Dennis Fisher catalogue in 1980 to try and give it a bit of a lift. And then, of course, after Empire Strikes Back was released, Palitoy took Star Wars back under its own wing then, which is really, and at that point it would have been at the height of its success.
One that's always strange is the 12-inch dolls. So they were kind of split up between Meccano, Dennis Fisher and Palitoy. So you see the Luke and the Leia on Palitoy boxes, but none of the others. Yeah, there's obviously some wrangling going on about who was going to get what.
Well, it's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes for sure.
Yeah, and do you get into much of that then? Have the guys got many memories of that time and what was going on there with that, or have you had to go looking for other sources for information?
Well, I think Jeff Maisie he really is the main source of knowledge in terms of kind of that sort of, I'm going to say, political structure within the Palitoy group and the General Mills group in general. So Jeff kind of does share a lot of insights on that front for sure. But that, yes, we do intend to cover as much of that as possible. We don't want to lose sight of the overall kind of narrative. I mean, we could go down rabbit holes and dive into kind of minutiae of kind of tiny details. So we don't want that to break up the flow of the narrative. Yeah. But certainly we do want to make it a fairly robust and fairly, comprehensive Palitoy story.
And do you go into the realms of, I mean, when we did our shows, we kind of went through that, release timeline, if you like, almost chronology year by year, what came out when. Have you got stuck on any of that? Because there was a few of the card backs we were scratching our heads on. I think, between the 41 backs and the 45 backs, what came out when, and maybe is that a level below what you try and illustrate in the book?
We were certainly looking at the releases, year by year, and our initial source for that is the Palitoy catalogs, which we have all of those. So. Yeah. But in terms of kind of looking at the card back variants and trying to put a bit of structure in that, we won't really go any deeper on that than what the work that Jason Smith has already done in terms of his own work documenting that. So you guys on your show probably really have, gone as deep as it can possibly go in terms of trying to, put a chronology on those releases.
Yeah. I think the basic card backs for the, the Palitoy releases, you got your 12, your 20, your 30, 41 and 45, and then obviously then the later Jedi and Tri logos, but then there's obviously then the sub variants within that. I think that's, we didn't go too deep into that because it does get I want to say geeky, but it's all a bit geeky, isn't it? But it's another level when you start talking about A, B's and C's and D's and however many other letters in the alphabet you want to tag on the end.
Well, as Jeff Maisie explained to us, they would have to go through everything had to be signed off by Lucasfilm. And we're talking specifically about the card backs here. So all of the legal lines and details had to be checked and signed off by Lucasfilm before they could go to press. But it would appear that there was it was changing all the time. So something that might have been approved, last month mightn't be right this month. And it could get tweaked and fine-tuned before it would go back to print. So that was one of the challenges that they had. And of course everything had to go back and forth between Leicester and New York, or I think it was New York at the time, but, to try and kind of make it a bit more, streamlined, Lucasfilm put an office into London, and that was in an effort to try and speed up the process. But it's still, by today's standards where we can do everything, by email, it was a much, more convoluted process.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that, fascinates me is, there's obviously, I think there's still some gaps in collectors' knowledge. No one's got definitive answers on a number of things. And again, it's all minutiae, but I'm hoping that, you might be able to, through these interviews, solve one or two. I mean, one that always surprises me, with the mail-aways, certainly some of the offers are thinking of things like the Forlom and even the Akbar. There wasn't really any advertising for that I'm aware of in the Marvel comics or in look-ins or anything like that I've seen. And they went on the backs of the Palitoy card backs. It appears they were only really promoted on the back of Kenner card backs with a Palitoy sticker over the back, which just amazes me that we didn't have that push beyond the card backs in the UK. And if, and Craig Spivey, when we spoke about all of this, he was kind of like, I was heavily into this at the time and they completely passed me by. I didn't know there was those mailaways were available until I got into collecting proper.
Wow.
But but then you'll get other stuff like the Dengar, another, minor character who, got heavily promoted. Yeah. Yeah.
There's no real kind of logic to it, Again, it depends what were their kind of driving forces behind the marketing at the time, what kind of budgets were available at the time, and then also who was making the call and stuff. So Monroe Dayton PR, they might have been driving some initiatives, whereas other things might have been coming directly from Palitoy's marketing department. Monroe Dayton PR, who are 100% focused on PR, could maybe focus in a little bit more on some of the promo stuff and could get a wider reach, whereas Palitoy's marketing department would have been handling multiple different brands, and maybe it was just slap a sticker on that. That'll do. We've other things to sort out, and of course Palitoy, they were printing their own cards, but they were also bringing in overstock cards from the US as well, just to keep up with the throughput of figures and vehicles.
Yeah. And is there anything like that you've kind of, you as you're going through this process and researching this, you hit a dead end with something? If you got in your mind that I'd love to be able to answer that question or find out more about this particular area?
That is a good question, because let's see now. Maybe not specific to kind of, card backs but I'd love to, probably more on the pre-production and design side of it, why were particular decisions made, or who made them, or how did they arrive at certain decisions. Like I got to speak with Greg Hughes there last weekend. As I mentioned Greg earlier, he's a designer. He worked in the X-Wing. And when I asked him about why he made some of the decisions he made to try and simplify the tooling, obviously the motive was to reduce cost, but there's a whole variety of things they could have done to try and reduce the cost. But when I pressed him on that, he just pointed at Bob Breakin and said he was the boss. He just said, find a way to make it cheaper. So it was kind of, it's an amusing story, but I didn't really get any, definitive answers.
Yeah.
But the boss said, find a way to make that cheaper. And that's how we got what we got.
Yeah. I think as collectors, we do put a lot of weight in knowing the logic. When you said there before, there's no logic behind it. Certainly I do. I kind of like to put all my ducks in a row and go, right, why this happened? Because of this, because of this, because of this. So always striving towards it. Another one that drives me mad is the original TIE Fighter. The rebranded version of that over from the States. So they put Palitoy logos all over the box and just released the electronic version. But then there was never an Empire Strikes Back version. There was, there was no re-releases of it until you get to 1983 or 1984 when they released the battle damage version. Yet we've got Darth Vader TIE Fighters coming out of our ears. So yeah, it was just a really, really odd choice. I don't know whether it's because they thought, kids will want to play with Darth Vader's TIE Fighter more than a regular one. The only logic that I could put behind it, and you ask people like Bob at toy shows, he must get asked that every time by Star Wars collectors, but he gives the same answer. He kind of shrugs his shoulders. It is what it is. Business decisions, and they did it based on that.
Like it's if you imagine, right, at the time when they were in the moment back in 1977, 78.
Yeah.
They were just doing a job. They had Star Wars on their decks. They had Action Man on their decks. They had Pippa, Tressie, Tiny Tears, and other stuff, Tippy Tumbles and Sheena, all these kind of dolls, like one of the biggest doll manufacturers in the country. So it's so many brands that they were focused on, and it was just a job. They were thinking about, how am I going to pay the bills at home? I want to plan my family vacation. What am I going to do at Christmas with the family? All that kind of day-to-day stuff that preoccupies all of our minds. And then, fast forward 40 years. They weren't documenting any of that stuff, any of the business decisions or anything like that. So they really are relying on memory. And unfortunately, was what you discover when you're kind of in the research business. Memory is a very fragile kind of source of information. Yeah. And where we can try and find, written evidence to kind of support our research, that's really important. So we've been using the British Newspaper Archive. It's an amazing resource, and we've been able to get a lot of information out of that. Probably doesn't answer any of the real kind of geeky kind of collector questions, right, but in terms of being able to track the kind of the timeline of the events for the company, we can get things very accurate, from that basis. Plus we're getting poll quotes from people who were interviewed at the time. That's a really great resource for the book too.
And have you run up against, so you mentioned there, obviously you trying to back up with facts. Have you run into anything where actually what you've had an interview doesn't quite line up with that, and you've had to go back to them and say, all conversations to try and get to the bottom of it?
We haven't had any kind of contradictions necessarily,
no.
But there's definitely a few areas that have things that come up where you've got are people's memories.
Yeah.
And, and the way so if that ends up making it into the final draft of the text, then, we'll be making it, clear that is the recollection of someone, as opposed to, it's written here in the Palitoy newsletter, in February 1982.
I can't remember what I did last week at work, let alone 20 years ago. But God knows what it'll be like in another 20 years' time.
I have tried to imagine what would it be like if someone came up to me with one of the designs I produced back in the late 90s and said, "What can you tell me about that?" And I'd probably look at it and go, "I don't even know if I did that."
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Action Man there a couple of times. I mean, and I do give Dave Tree some stick because we can't do a segment without him mentioning Action Man.
Action Man from Palitoy.
Much of a part does that play into the book itself in terms of how Palitoy were at the time? And mentioned Action Man there a bit at the start when you said that that's what they were primarily working on. That was their toy of the year, or toy of the decade, should I say, and biggest success. Did that play a big part then? And then on the other side of that, obviously the influence of Star Wars over Action Man, turning into Action Force. Is that mentioned at all? Does that play part in the book?
Oh yeah, so all of that stuff there, it does get touched on. So you have to ask you, why did Kenner insist that Palitoy carries the Star Wars brand? And you have to look back at, you have a decades long, even before Palitoy was called Palitoy, they'd already established a reputation as being great doll designers and innovators. And when they took on Action Man then in the late 60s, they were able to, again, innovate with that and bring that to market, to the boys market and make it the top selling boys toy in the UK. So it established that Palitoy had fantastic credentials, both as designers, but and as marketers and distributors. They ticked all the boxes as being a company that knows how to do this job really, really well. So when Bob and Roger went over to Kenner in late 77, part of that meeting was to also for Kenner to get a good sense of, do these guys, do they know what they're at? Are they going to be able to make and produce and sell these toys? And Bob and Roger impressed their Kenner counterparts. So establishing that kind of that trust that was needed. And of course, you mentioned Action Force there. So obviously when things kind of, downscaled, Action Force kind of essentially Palitoy used everything that they knew about 5 points of articulation figures, like the Star Wars figures. They modeled their Action Force line on that. It was a tried and tested model, and they figured, well, if that works, this is going to work. And it did. And what we'll touch on is in our book is a little bit of a crossover between Action Force and Star Wars. So there's lots of really good examples where Star Wars tooling got incorporated into Action Force designs. Some Action Force accessories were used on Star Wars figures and vice versa. We even uncovered, thanks to Joe there at Leicester Vintage Toys, uncovered a Palitoy prototype piece. It's the canopy of the ISP-6, but it's colored up as red, like not painted, like red plastic.
Yeah.
Clearly they were looking at finding some way to kind of maybe redevelop that possibly into their Action Force line. So that'll be featured in the book too.
Yeah, I'm not an Action Force guy. I never had it as a kid. I knew friends that had it, but it was never something that I had bought for me. I saw the adverts on TV, but I do own a Baron Ironblood with a Han Solo blaster. That's the Action Force entry in my collection. There was also there was some marketing as well, wasn't there? There was the Guess It's True offer. I think that was in 84 where they marketed Star Wars and Action Force as in the same advertising.
That's right. We actually, again, one of the collectors that we visited, in Leicester back in October last year had a large format poster. I think it's like 2x4 foot size poster with that promo. And you've got the Star Wars mini rigs and the Action Force figures kind of illustrated side by side. So we got to photograph that. And in fact, my own, as a personal recollection, my introduction to Action Force came with a Palitoy leaflet that must have been included in a Star Wars vehicle box that I got at Christmas time, with a special offer to send back the instructions as proof of purchase.
Right.
I could claim either a mini rig or an entire team of Action Force. I didn't know that about Action Force at the time, so I went for the mini rig, and I didn't go for the Action Force frigate. They sent back my instructions to me with the mini rigs, which is great. And then a few months later, I kind of started, I saw, so try and not get into too convoluted story, but I decided I was going to get into Action Force, and I wrote back to them again, this time trying to get the Action Force team. Palitoy sent me back my instructions, sent me back my postal order, and a handwritten note, or not a handwritten, a typed letter from Palitoy telling me that the offer was now over.
Oh.
So, and I wish I'd have kept that letter. That would be great to include in the book. So.
Yeah. Superb. They had and there's quite a few of those kind of examples. I mean, Dave's quite an avid collector of that kind of stuff, so it might be worth, having a word with him if there's anything like that you need for the book. Cause he had a really good example of someone who, rather than cutting the nameplates out of their card backs, sent in photocopies. Where someone had a photocopier in the early 80s, that surprises me. Sending photocopies of the card backs, and Palitoy wrote back to him and said they couldn't accept the photocopies and needed the nameplates.
Oh, wow.
So they weren't messing around.
That is amazing. Palitoy, they were great at kind of communicating with their customers. And that's like, there must have been thousands of people kind of contacting Palitoy, and they did make the effort to, they responded to my, letter to them, and so if they're responding to me, then I'm sure they were responding to anybody who got in touch.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I found most surprising in the research that we did and the information that Dave saved with us, and you kind of alluded to it as well, that they weren't afraid to do things differently from how the Americans were doing it. I mean, the fact that they were promoting dual promotions of Action Force and Star Wars combined, I don't think there's any other examples in the world where Star Wars was marketed with another license. It's pretty unique in that respect.
That is actually, if you're right, that's pretty revolutionary, for the time. And it worked very well for Palitoy, being the Action Force. I mean, at one point it was even outselling the Star Wars products. So it ended up being very successful for them.
Yeah. And have you, obviously through all this research, you're seeing loads of stuff. You've been tempted to go out and make any purchases over the course of this time?
My collecting budget wouldn't extend far enough for some of the things I've seen.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I mean, you mentioned their prototypes as well. Is there much out there? Cause I was, I can only imagine that obviously the stuff that they produced in-house, like the Palitoy Death Star and stuff like that, I think there's obviously prototypes to that knocking around, but have you seen anything else that's not just socks off that you can share with us?
Well, I did see a prototype Palitoy Death Star last weekend.
Yes.
And we took some photographs of that are going to be included in the book. But what's really nice about it is that it's marked up where there was issues that needed to be addressed in the construction of it. Right. So this would have the finished artwork that's used in the final printed piece. And this would maybe have been a first shot of the presses, which they then tried to assemble, spotted where there was maybe some errors with alignment, and kind of marked that up. And that would have gone back to they probably would have, they wouldn't have produced just one because it's done off the presses, but there might have been, a bunch of those, but they would have been marked up with the issues and returned back to the printers. We got close-up shots of kind of the markups. I mean, they're not, complicated notes or anything. They're just more like arrows pointing to areas that had to be addressed.
Yeah.
Mainly the slots where the tabs had to connect. But it's a nice little, just again, a little insight into the production process. Yeah. And of course, it does exist. It's out there. There might be other prototype Death Stars out there too. So it's a really nice, collectible that's kind of documented in the book too.
That's mind blowing. Is that owned by a collector or is that a Palitoy employee?
Not allowed to say.
You can't say either. Right. Okay. That thing is, if that ever gets sold, someone could be very rich very quickly. We'll move on. But yeah, was there any other kind of prototype stuff?
Well, there are some tooling aids. So for Return the Jedi figures, Palitoy got were sent a whole load of tooling aid to produce tooling to make Return the Jedi figures. But then a decision was made at some point that they weren't going to do that. But a lot of work had been done in kind of preparing. The tooling never got made, but all the prep work was done for getting the tooling done. So some of those pieces are going to be included in the book as well. So they would be very rare and they'd be very high valuable kind of collectibles.
I saw as well that
you're one of a kind,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just nuts. This stuff that people just don't even probably know exist. But yeah, you're going to shed some light on them. And things like I saw some of the in some of your your promo shots on the Kickstarter there, you had photographs of things like the Greyling Stormtroopers. Now that's quite a controversial piece in collecting. There's a lot of people who just will not have it that those things are legit, purely because of the source of them, where they originally kind of came onto the market from. I think the story behind them is that they were found or being sold at car boot sales. I'm assuming in the Leicestershire area, a quantity of them as well. And then they filtered out into the market, but there was suspicion that they were faked. We've done some research, well, not us personally, but one of our good friends, Lee Bullock, who's actually works in the plastics industry. He's works in a lab, I think. And he actually run one through the equipment they've got to do some checks on it. And he's got his own theories on them, but it's,
that's it. There's always going to be a bit of controversy. And I mean, what I can say from our research, we sat down with the Greyling Stormtroopers in hand and we discussed them with Bob Breakin and Roger Morrison. They confirmed that they did come from, that there were test shots that came from a factory in China.
Yeah. Okay.
And but that's not, again, they can't put a document down on the table that says this is, there's no written evidence to support that. So all we can do is go with on the, what our Palitoy kind of people are telling us. But at the same time, the research, it's kind of like a science, you never you have to keep your mind open. So if new information came to light that definitively said this is where the source of these figures, then if there was ever going to be a second edition of any of the books I've ever done and new information came out that kind of contradicted what was in them, you just update the facts.
Yeah.
With the new information and put that into the second edition.
If Bob says, these have been through the factory at least, it just supports the being legit. I'd love to get one. I've got, my collection really, between Palitoy and Empire Strikes Back, and, to get one of those in my collection would be superb. But they don't come up that often anymore and they're commanded more and more.
I mean, I saw 4 of them in the one collection.
I know, I saw the photo. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But obviously we've got the Marvel section that's funded now. Did you want to talk to that a little bit and what that's going to cover?
Well, before we get into that, just to say, for people who are listening to this, the Kickstarter campaign actually funded in less than 72 hours. So we hit our initial funding goal, which was fantastic. And then about 24 hours later, we unlocked the first stretch goal. And the first stretch goal is really adding 60 pages of extra content to the book. So that's going to include, obviously it does talk about the Marvel UK material, but it's going to be a little bit more expanded than what I presented at Farthest From back in December, because it's going to look at the wider kind of impact that Star Wars had on the comic scene. So that will include things like 2000 AD, maybe from a more kind of, mainstream pop culture perspective. Look In magazine, which had a lot of Star Wars features and Star Wars covers, that is going to be, featured in that particular section as well. And then even, other kind of comics kind of outside the sci-fi genre, like even the Beano and Whizzer, all picked up on the whole Star Wars, mania that was going around at the time and introduced stuff there. We even had a piece today that I saw that's going to be featured. Hopefully we can get the licensing to feature it, where Mark Hamill was a member of the Dennis the Menace fan club. And an illustration depicting that featured in the Beano. So if I can get the rights to include that, that will also be featured in that chapter.
I'm just going to share something with you, Brian. I don't know whether you've seen this or not. So you obviously know Craig passed away last year. So he documented not just the covers, but every single mention of Star Wars in Looking magazine. But it is massively detailed. It talks about the artists that worked on it. It goes through the social commentary of what was going on at the time. It's a really deep dive into Looking. It was kind of his little passion project. So yeah, I mean, if you want to use any of that and get Craig in the acknowledgements, it would be amazing. But yeah, there's a lot of information there. I'm not sure how much of that you already know, but it is comprehensive to say the least.
Well, the comic section really is David MacDonald's expertise. So David worked with myself and Paddy on the Action Force books, and typically how we kind of split out share the knowledge is that David is very much a comics expert. Paddy is an expert on the toys, and my kind of strength is also in the toys, but I'm looking to always kind of tell that sort of human story. To get it beyond just the facts and figures of the releases, and bring that out, think that more kind of, I suppose, another level to the storytelling. I will definitely share this with him, because I'm just scrolling through this here. This looks amazing. And we know who the license holder is on this, and we already have agreements from the license holder to get this stuff unlocked and include, or not unlocked. I've got stretch goals on the mind here right now, so it's everything. We're trying to unlock the next stretch goal.
You mentioned 72 hours though to fame, wasn't it? It was 24. You're losing track of time, man. It was on the Saturday, by the Saturday lunchtime it had funded. It went super quick, didn't it? 'Cause I was out walking the dog on Saturday afternoon. I was like, holy cow, it's there. We've got this.
You're dead right. It did. I mean, it surprised us all how quickly it funded. So, and I'm obviously thrilled.
Yeah.
But last weekend was just, we just launched the campaign, and then about an hour later, I was at the airport getting ready to fly over to Leicester, and didn't get back to Ireland till probably 1 a.m. On Monday morning. So everything that happened over the weekend was a real blur.
It was great to see. And, it looks like, the collecting community's definitely got behind this in a massive way. I know there's a lot of chatter on some of the groups that I'm in about it, and people are really looking forward to getting their hands on it. In terms of the design on the book, obviously you've produced the Total Action Force books previously. Is there any similarities in design and layout to those books? Are you trying to make them of the same cloth, or is this going to be a different book entirely?
The size and format will be the same in terms of the physical book. Okay. It'll be the same size and landscape like that. Yeah. Right now we've only got a paperback book. But if we hit our next stretch goal, and I'm confident that we will hit it, it'll be a hardback edition.
Nice.
And that'll make it exactly the same size then as the Total Action Force books. But the interior design on it, I think it's going to be evolved a little bit more. And it's going to be very much kind of photo driven, because there's a lot of photography I want to get into this book. It's going to be bigger than the Total Action Force books. It's going to have, 60 plus extra pages. Yeah. So the design won't be kind of a straight up kind of copy of that. And I know that the designs we've shared on the Kickstarter, I mean, they're only preliminary designs. So that is going to evolve, as we work through the project. Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit more fresher in terms of the design. It's going to be more photo driven, and lots of breathing space for those old photos to really let them, so that the readers can just really soak up the detail in those.
Yeah, I mean, the samples that you've shown, they do look great. As some of those toy show photos I saw at the weekend with, I think it was an Empire Strikes Back stand, and it's got all of the costumes and stuff like that around it. It looks superb. It really does. Can't wait to get it. You're going to have to hurry up and make this thing now. How long are you going to keep us waiting for it?
Well, I think I can't remember what we said on the Kickstarter. It was definitely going to be out this year.
Okay.
So I think we're seeing Q4 2025.
Okay.
Right. But obviously, as we work through it, we'll be keeping our backers updated, and, you know, they'll be very much up to speed on, you know, how we're getting on with the design, the production, and when it goes to print. But certainly, you know, early Q4 at the latest, to get it into people's hands.
In terms of research and doing interviews with people, when's that kind of phase coming to an end, or has it come to an end now with last weekend's trip?
I would say that we're almost at the end. So we have there's already a first draft of the text written. We've had some follow-up interviews this weekend. That's going to feed into a second draft. And so the second draft will be, you know, that should be, I would say, if not finished by the time the campaign ends, it'll be very, very, very nearly finished at that stage. And then we kind of step back and have a, you know, ask ourselves, are there any other gaps in there that we really need to fill in? So I don't want to say that the research work is, if I said it's done now, that would just be too complacent. We want this to be as thoroughly researched as possible. So if we have to go for another round of kind of interviews or another trip to the UK, then absolutely we're going to do that. But we won't really know now until we've sat down and kind of reviewed everything, both in terms of the second draft of the text, but also we're sitting on hundreds of photographs that I've taken and photographs that we have shortlisted for licensing. And we've approached all of our licensors, and we have our quotes in, we have everything ready to go on that. It's just a case of making the final selection of what we're going to use. So that's something that, that's another part of it. It's not research per se, but it kind of ties in with that sort of gathering stage of the project. So I would think, you know, realistically, we're going to go up to maybe into May, you know, before that's all fully locked down. And by then our kind of preliminary design work will all be completed as well. So we'll have all of our styles set up for a design rollout over the summer, and then going into the print then maybe late summer. That's a rough kind of outline of the schedule, but, you know, things could shift either forward or back a little bit as we work through it.
We've spoken about the Marvel tier being unlocked. What are the other unlocks that you've got? You mentioned the hardback cover as well, and then there's one or two more.
That's right. The next one after the hardcover is to add some kind of enhanced print finishes to the book. So we'll integrate a design into the front cover design. We'll integrate some foil blocking into that. Nice head and tail bands on the binding, and of course we look at bringing the paperweight up to the next level, to give the book even more kind of weight and presence. So they're kind of little finishes that we'll integrate into the overall finish of the book. It's still going to look great even if we don't hit that stretch goal, but it'll just take it up that extra level to something a little bit more deluxe. And then of course our final stretch goal that we've got up there in the campaign is to unlock a slipcase that will go with the book. And the slipcase is designed, it's got this kind of telescoping, interlocking type of doorway, which Star Wars fans will recognize immediately for the homage that it is.
I was going to say, was that deliberate or not? Because I've seen similar kind of slipcases before, but it is very much those blast doors on the Death Star kind of, you know, close the blast doors kind of feel.
It absolutely, it's an homage to that. So, and again, the graphics on the slipcase that were shown on the Kickstarter, they're just kind of, you know, preliminary graphics. That will be refined a lot more in the design process.
So is the cover final with the AT-AT? Is that the final cover, or are you likely to change that as well, do you think?
The photograph is that's the final photo. So that's a photo that I've taken of my vintage AT-AT here. And then I've just overlaid it onto an old photograph of the Palitoy factory to kind of create that particular image. And it is inspired by a photo that was taken by Neville Chadwick. But because the Chadwick archive has recently been kind of sold, we were unable to secure a license to use that, the Neville Chadwick photo.
Who's Neville Chadwick? Sorry, that you'll have to help.
So he was a photographer who did a lot of work for Palitoy. So the Palitoy specific marketing graphics, some of the shots in their product catalogs, things like that. So he would have photographed a lot of that material.
So he's the Palitoy equivalent of like Kim Simmons kind of.
Exactly. Well, I tell you, one of his most famous photos that all your listeners will be aware of is the photo of the cardboard Death Star.
Right. Okay.
On the cover of the box.
Yes.
So what you have there is the model, the boy playing with the Death Star is the son of designer, Dave Barnacle. who we also interviewed for this book. Dave is a graphic designer, and Dave worked very closely then with Neville. He would bring Neville in to do the photography for his designs. So Neville took that photo, and that's one that you'll all know, but he did obviously lots of photography for Palitoy. So that particular image that I was talking about for the front cover, we really wanted to kind of license that, to use that on the cover.
And is that the same AT-AT as on the cover of My Palitoy Story?
Well, the AT-AT on the cover of My Palitoy Story is my AT-AT.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what's on the current design for total Star Wars toys.
The world's most famous AT-AT, nearly.
When this book comes out, it will be.
About the sliding cover, just a question on that. I mean, it mentions if you buy the book, there's certain tiers where you'll have to pay extra for that. Any indication yet of how much it is going to be to get that cover added to your order? If you've only ordered like the very lowest tier?
Well, the way we want to do it is that the people who've gone all in, they're going to get an amazing deal for going all in. So it will be probably more cost efficient for people to just upgrade their pledge to an all-in pledge, their Red 5 pledge, than to just add on the slipcover as a separate piece. So, but that has to be, I just want to get that pricing right, because I want to make sure that the people who have gone for Red 5, that they are getting the best deal, and they're not going to be sold short.
And what of it? So there's obviously different levels of which you can go into the Kickstarter at. So do you want to take us through those so people know what options they've got?
We did have an early bird where you just got a copy of the book, and you saved over 25% on that. The early bird ran for the first 72 hours and is now, that's expired. So you can go in now at the Red 2 level. So that you just get a copy of the book, nothing else, and shipped to you for €48 plus shipping. And I think that works out at maybe around £40 for at the Red 2 level. Obviously, if we unlock that the upgrades to a hardback, there's no change in price at all. So you end up getting a coffee table hardback book for the price of a regular book.
Amazing.
The next one up is Red 3, and we call that our light side reward package. So you get the book, but you also get a poster and a postcard set that features diorama photography of the vintage toys in various kind of Star Warsy scenes. So it's a nice little kind of a light side add-on, that accompanies the book. And then there's Red 4 is the dark side reward package. So it's the same. It's a poster and a postcard set, but it's going to feature, the dark side of Star Wars, so the bounty hunters and the Empire. Red 5 is what we're calling our all-in package.
Yeah.
And that gets you the book plus the light and dark side packages included. And if we unlock the slipcase, that gets added as well. No extra cost. And then we have kind of a red leader and a gold leader, which are really their high end kind of reward tiers. So they're big books. They're going to be looking at, maybe people with kind of a retail element where they can get multiple copies of the book, but they also get, for a collector, they're going to get a one-off art piece printed at a, very large size, framed and shipped to them. And if someone wants to go for that reward tier, that's effectively you're commissioning a piece of art, essentially, as well as getting all of the copies of the book that are included with that reward. So we'll have a chat, or I'll have a chat with that backer and go through what they would like to see in that photo. And essentially that they're commissioning me to take a diorama photo that they can hang up in their studio or home or wherever.
Amazing. So yeah, lots of options there for people to weigh up. How long is it open for? I know you started on the 28th of Feb, and I think is it a full month then that it's available for the Kickstarter?
Yep, it'll wrap up at I think 5 p.m. on March 30th. I'm going to be in Redditch in the UK on the 29th for Echo Base Live.
Yes.
So I'll have a table there. So in those kind of final hours of the campaign, I'll be there to kind of talk total Star Wars toys. When anybody wants to come by the table, any questions about the campaign, they can come up to me and have a chat. And hopefully by that stage, we'll have a couple more of those stretch goals unlocked, and we'll be down to the finish to see if we can get the slipcase unlocked too.
Nice. So by 5:00 on the Sunday afternoon, we'll know where that landed, what side of the fence that's landed on.
Oh yeah.
Exciting. Very good. Oh, well, for you, I mean, it's obviously, this is a passion for you doing these books. What drives you on this? What's your, what keeps you energized when you're doing this stuff?
I love, obviously, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'm a big, vintage toy collector, and I love to tell stories. What attracts me to this is literally, it's the Palitoy story. That's what I want to get across. And I think there's a really interesting story to tell there. It's a story of, creativity, passion, and great friendships. And I hope that comes across in the book. But it also is going to be a great visual resource for people just to look back on historic photos, ones that they'd never seen before, and some that they will have seen before, but reproduced, in the high resolution.
Yeah.
And just a good archive of the toys that Palitoy released. So trying to connect with collectors and Star Wars fans on kind of different levels.
It's some fantastic work. My Palitoy story, I know we spoke about it at length previously, but it is a fantastic book. And it's not only for that, it's fantastic that Bob's got to document that, and it's going to be around for a long, long time for collectors to enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we're doing a bunch more now. You're getting the whole gang involved this time.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, there's great support amongst Bob's kind of, Palitoy colleagues, for this. And, this is part of the legacy that they've, from their careers. One of the things that really strikes me when I get to meet those people is how proud they are of that work.
Yeah.
They didn't know how profoundly it was impacting a generation at the time. But, today, now that they've seen the effects of that, they're really proud of that, and being able to kind of capture, all of that, their memories and the information, into the pages of a book, that they're very supportive, and it means a lot to them.
Probably now, it's probably our dream job, isn't it? Oh, we're going to go and work in the Palitoy factory and play with Star Wars toys all day. I'm sure it wasn't quite as romantic as that, but what a great career to have had. What a great place to have worked, and a great time. I know with a child inside me would love to have gone there.
As I'm looking back on those photos, everybody just looks really happy. They look like they're loving what they're doing. Nobody looks kind of browned off or cheesed off. They're just, they look like they're having a great time. So I'd say it would have been an amazing team of people to have worked with back in the day.
You've done quite a lot of work now around Palitoy specifically. Is there any other areas of Palitoy you'd like to cover in the future, or any other toy lines? Have you had any thoughts about that, or are you still concentrating on this at the minute?
It's actually, well, I do have a very long list of projects that I want to move on to. And some of those do include other Palitoy brands. I'd love to do vintage Action Man. And I know that while I wasn't a collector of the 90s Action Man, I do love what was created as part of that. The visual aesthetic of the packaging, the illustration work, the figures themselves is I think there's another great story there in that too. And I know Dave Tree is a big Action Man fan as well. And he's even said it to me a few times, so much to do a book about 90s Action Man. That would be a great project. But there's other, great toy lines as well that I would love to explore further outside of the Palitoy portfolio. But it's just a case of, I've got to get this one done first, and into the next one.
So no teasers then for the next one. Is there a sequel in this? Is there enough material to do a second book, or is this a one and done, do you think?
Right now I'm approaching it as if it's a one and done. So like everything that I've got is going into this. So unless there's a massive kind of uncovering of new material and I think this will be my contribution to the many great Star Wars books that are out there already. I'll just have to give a shout out to the Red 5 guys. I got their book earlier in the week.
Yeah.
I'm blown away. There's more stuff in that than I imagined there was going to be, and it's an incredible job with that.
I haven't got that one, but you're right. There are a lot of books out there, but no one's done this book. No one's done the Palitoy book. And I think that's what's getting people excited. I mean, I've been, you know, I've been collecting for many years, but, you know, in terms of community, really for the last 10 years or so, you know, with the guys, down at Farthest From initially and involved in various podcasts and forums and things like that. And people have spoken about, a Palitoy collecting book for years, you know, Star Wars Palitoy collecting book. I remember, you know, Dave Tree teasing him about it when we recorded the last one, saying, why hasn't he done it yet? You know, he did the Palitoy archive at Celebration back in 2007. He was the ideal candidate, you know, at first blanch, but, yeah, I think he blinked. And, you beaten everyone to the punch, and it's so good to see. I mean, we see, you know, there's Meccano books out there, the French Touch, you've got the PvP book, you've got numerous American collecting books. To get one that's the stuff that we collected back then is really, really special, and I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Oh, that's great feedback to get. I appreciate that, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. So if people want to pledge, where do they go?
Well, if they get over to Kickstarter, and if you do a search for Total Star Wars Toys, the Palitoy Saga, that'll bring you to the campaign page and you can pledge there. But you can also find the link on TotalToyBooks.com and also on our socials on Facebook, Total Toy Books on Facebook, and Instagram, my personal Instagram account, Brian the Hick. You'll find links in there. There's lots of different ways that you'll find your way to the Kickstarter campaign page. Even just Google Total Star Wars Toys, the Palitoy Saga. It'll get you in there.
Or they could check the notes on this podcast, because I'll stick it in there as well. So there's lots of different ways. You've got no excuse for not getting behind this one. If you're interested in Palitoy, or you're interested in Star Wars, or you like a combination of both, I think we've got them covered.
Absolutely. That it's Star Wars toys, but also, yeah, if you're just interested in Palitoy alone, it's a great Palitoy story as well. So,
yeah, any other closing thoughts?
Well, you know, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who has pledged to date, helping us hit our funding goals so early on and unlock that extra content in the book, which is really important for me to have that in there. I'm really grateful to our backers, and I'm very excited to kind of, you know, get to the other side of this campaign and then get our teeth into bringing all of this book together in physical form, getting into people's hands later this year, and and kind of sharing that story. And just, you know, a final plug that I will be at Echo Base Live on March the 29th. So if you're in Redditch, if you're at that show, come by the table and let's talk Total Star Wars toys. Any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, all the best with it, Brian, and with Paddy as well. Hope it all pans out. I mean, it's funded, so that's half the battle right now. So let's just, let's see what else unlocks. But yeah, congratulations on that, if nothing else. And I'm really looking forward to getting the book. And, yeah, hopefully I'll get to see Echo Base as well.
Brilliant, Al. I'd love that, Dan. That'd be great.
Cheers, Brian. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers, buddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.